Hello, guys. We're on to our supply side of things today. It's day 14. Um, Keeping that in mind, if you have not gone to day 12 and done the demand stuff yet, I would suggest that you get to that point and go in order of the notes. It hopefully will help you understand things a little bit clearer. Um, if you have watched those, you know that these are what the notes generally look like for this. Okay, obviously you should have them filled in. We're moving down to the front half of the definition of supply here shortly. Before we get to that, take a minute and answer these questions. Okay, and again, we had some practice with those on the Google form. Those are not for a grade, they're just for practice to show you how you're doing. So if you struggled, take a minute, answer these. Even if you did well, go ahead and take a second and look at these questions and take a guess. Pause it if you have to. All right. So the first one, we've got an increase in the price of steak, and then we're going to ask you about the demand for chicken, which substitutes it. So if steak gets more expensive, we should be guessing that the demand for chicken is going to increase. Okay, so an increase in demand for chicken because I am substituting that particular food for the other. Number two, if there's an increase in the price of steak, what's that going to do for our demand for steak sauce? So if the price of steak goes up, that means I'm not going to eat as much steak sauce. So I should see a decrease in demand for steak sauce. Okay. And one thing to kind of think about these is it doesn't mean that everyone's going to stop buying steak sauce or everyone's going to start buying chicken. We're just giving it our best guess. Okay. So keep that in mind as you go along. It doesn't necessarily mean how you would respond. Okay, it's our best prediction for how people are going to respond. All right, so moving on to the third one. If all of a sudden there's a diet fad, what would we expect to happen to the market for fried onion rings? Now, assuming you know that fried onion rings are not necessarily very healthy, um, we would expect that to decrease our demand for onion rings in that particular case. Okay, so the first two shifters are easy. We've got a substitute good, a complement good, and on the third one, we have like a fad, right? I even mentioned the fad in the question there. Okay, so if you are unsure what those shifters are, you need to go back and make sure that you watch that video and review that stuff. Okay, number four is getting us into the conversation we're having today. Okay, we're asking you some costs that go into the production of something, and when we talk about supply, it's a little bit trickier to wrap our heads around because we're not suppliers of very much, right? We haven't done that very much, except for if you've looked for a job, you are supplying your labor. Um, so if you want to list some costs there, the best way is anything that goes into a particular product, okay, which the production of it. So you have like the natural resources, right? We're going to throw in our factors of production. You got your natural resources, you've got the labor, all right, and maybe some production costs with like taxes and paying rent and those types of things. And those broadly pretty much mention all those costs. And if you can understand how business operates, that if it becomes more expensive, that people are going to produce less if it's super expensive to produce something, or try to produce more if it's cheap to produce something. Um, you're going to be on the right track here moving forward. Okay, so there are some similarities to looking at demand and supply. Most notably, the definition here is extremely similar, right? But we had demand, and we said willing and able to buy something, right? Demand it, and so the supply side of things, we have to be willing and able also. Okay, so um, as an example, I'm very willing to go play a professional sport. I would be very happy playing a game and making that kind of money. The problem is with my skill set. Most notably is I'm not extremely tall. So if I was trying to play in the NBA, I'm only 6 feet tall. I do not fit into the prototype NBA player that is obviously much taller. So as much as I'm willing to supply that, I'm unable to. Okay, no one wants to hire me to do that, so I'm unable to supply at those prices. On the flip side, I do have some access to being able to, like, let's just say, go in my backyard, dig a hole, and try to sell dirt. Right? I have the ability to do that. I have the resources and the labor to do that. However, I wouldn't make any money. Okay, and so I'm not willing to waste my time doing those things. Okay, so we have to have those two things to supply something. Now, our law of supply is going to say, kind of, again, another similar thing to the demand, but our law of supply says that as the price of something increases, so as an example, a wage, okay, because that's what we would supply, our labor, we get paid a wage. As that goes up, okay, we convinced our willingness and ability to supply things increases. Okay, so our willingness, we say, all right, I'm going to be much more willing to supply something at those particular prices. Okay, or I'm going to find the ability to do that as well if I'm going to be able to make more money. Okay, so you're writing that stuff. Okay, hopefully you're following along and you're used to seeing what you're supposed to see if you were doing it with the demand stuff. You wrote down your law of the definition of supply, sorry, and then your law of supply right there. And now we're going to graph this supply curve. All right. So if we're going to graph our supply curve here, the nice thing is our axes stay exactly the same. So we have basically just a giant L here. We have our price again, and then we have our quantity down here. Okay, and we're just going to label our price. We're going to put it up here. I'm going to label things by $5 this time. So I'm going to shorten mine. I'm going to say 10, 20, 30, 40. Okay, and our quantity, again, it doesn't really matter for our quantity here for what I'm going to try to describe. So either way, we could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so my question to you, and I want you to think about this for a second, is if I were to offer you an opportunity to work outside all summer long, okay, and the opportunity was to work outside all summer, if I were going to offer you $5 an hour to work at the city dump, okay, the county dump, which most of you are familiar with that, how many of you would say, I can't wait to work at the dump for $5 an hour? I'm going to assume it's going to be down here in this range, right? Not very many of you would work for $5 an hour. Not many of you would do anything for $5 an hour because that's below minimum wage. Now, if I said, okay, that I would pay you $15 an hour to work at the dump, I'm going to say, well, maybe a couple of you are like, you know what? Maybe I'd do that for 15 bucks. And again, I'm guessing, right? I don't have you in front of me. Now, if I put it up though to $25 an hour, now we're kind of talking some serious money. If I said $25 an hour, I'm going to guess that like maybe 5 of you guys would decide to do it. And eventually, I'm going to get to the point where I'm going to offer you enough money that you are going to be convinced to work at the dump for one summer. And whether that's $100 an hour or $150 an hour, eventually everybody has their price that they're going to decide to be able to tough it out for a certain price. Okay. And so, whatever that number is, right, you can kind of see our supply curve is going to move in this direction. Okay. Which is the opposite of what our demand curve does, right? Remember, our demand curve was doing this, okay, going this way. And again, if my line was perfectly straight, I draw my supply lines perfectly straight. But our law of supply says, again, that as the price of something increases, more people are going to become willing and able to supply. Okay? Now, we can also shift our supply, just like with our situation with demand. Okay, so I'm going to start us off here. I've got my price, I've got my quantity, and I've got my original supply line. All right. The nice thing is we had an acronym back on the other day, IRDL. Okay, it's super important because it's going to help us with the supply curve. So I stands for increase, if you remember, right? Decrease, left. Okay, and you should be back on the back side of your page right here. Okay, scrolling down, we're going to show you how to shift this stuff. So now we're going to shift our supply curve back on this back side of this page. And if we keep that in mind, all right, we're going to increase to the right. So as we do that, and I'll show you why we use this acronym. So we're going to increase to the right. I'm going to label this with an S and an I for increase. Okay, so we increase this way. Well, if you look at that, not super close, it looks like it's going down, right? And so our brain plays tricks on us and we say, okay, when we say decrease, we think down and we start shifting things backwards. Okay, so keep this hurdle in mind. It's going to help you out in the long run. I promise. We're going to get to why we do that and keep it straight. But we're going to crawl before we walk, so to speak. All right. And then if we decrease our supply, I'm going to label this with an S and a D. Okay, we're going to shift it to the left. And again, the opposite thing happens, right? The opposite looks like if we're going to decrease, it looks like it's going up, but in fact it's going left. So try to keep that straight as we move forward here, and it's going to help you out, like I said, in the long run as you draw these things out. Okay. Now we have these 6 shifters. We're right below where we just drew those graphs. We've got these 6 shifters. We're going to start listing them down here. All right. And again, there's going to be a reason, and I'll explain later on why we have these right next to each other. But we're not to that point yet. So anyway, to finish things off here, we've got 6 shifters. All right. First of all, we can change the cost of inputs. Okay. And those inputs, I'll just list them real quick for the sake of it. Again, we've got natural resources. You have to take my word. My handwriting is not this bad, but my screen shakes if you can see what I'm kind of trying to do and deal with here. So I apologize. You'll have to bear with me. We've got natural resources. We've got labor. And I'm going to throw in like taxes in there too. And we're going to mention taxes again later, but I'm going to mention those and other types of costs like rent or whatever that we have to pay on a month to month basis or whatever a business might have to deal with. Okay, so that doesn't cover everything, but those are some good examples. So that's number one. The next thing we have is we have a change in the number of producers. Okay, so if we just have more people producing, we're going to shift it to the right. We're going to increase our supply. If we're going to have less producers, we're going to decrease our supply. Okay, natural disasters, that's going to affect probably, again, we think about like what a natural disaster does. It destroys things, right? And so, we destroy crops. Well, crops are going to become more expensive. Crops are an input of production, but natural disasters, weather, is going to shift things also. And we can also have great weather too. Okay, so you can add great weather. I don't know what the word for that is. I'll call it a phenomenon, but I'm going to write great weather because there are some good weather situations too, record harvests, right? Changes in technology. Remember, technology affects costs in the way that it's going to make things cheaper. Think about why machines are built to replace humans. Machines don't call in sick. Machines can work 24 hours a day. Machines don't need health insurance. And so people want to hire machines to do work. You think about what happens over at McDonald's. McDonald's over here on US 33 about 2 years ago installed these automated ordering machines right inside. Well, that's about the same time that we had this movement where people were arguing for a $15 minimum wage. That's not a coincidence. McDonald's doesn't want to pay their workers that much money. So they figured out a way. They have these automated machines, right, where now they don't have to hire as many people. And so anyway, that's an example of a change in technology, how it can make things cheaper. Obviously, it's going to make things faster in probably pretty much every sector that people produce stuff in. Okay, so that's another shift in our supply. Number 5 is the trickiest one. And number 5, the closest way I can explain it to you that you might have some familiarity with is you guys are owning some stock right now in that stock market game, right? And so you guys owning that stock basically makes you the owner. When you want to get rid of it, you have to sell it, meaning you have to supply it. So if you can wrap in your head and say, okay, if I thought the price of this stock was going to go up tomorrow, right? So if I thought I could make more money tomorrow, am I going to sell it today? Not if you're intelligent, right? So I would decrease my supply. So price up tomorrow equals decrease supply today. You might want to add this in there simply because it'll help you keep things straight, all right? And price down tomorrow, right? Meaning you're not going to make as much money tomorrow equals increased supply today. Okay, so that's a tricky one. You got to wrap your head around it because, again, we don't think that way very often. Okay, but you are doing that with the stock market game. Hopefully, you're able to wrap your head around it. The last one here is that government policy I kind of mentioned at first. A tax, meaning the government is going to take money out of a company's pocket, is going to shift our curve to the left, right? That's our decrease. Okay, a shift to the right is going to be our increase, and that's due to a subsidy. All right, a subsidy is the opposite of a tax. The government will pay certain companies to do certain things. In the past, a lot of green energy companies were getting some tax breaks. Fancy word of saying or fancy way of saying subsidy. They haven't been as popular the last 4 years, but that would be an example of what was being implemented. Okay, those are your notes. So just like last week, okay, we gave you guys basically a set of headlines, okay? And so we're moving down here. We're to option I. So see where it says supply headlines here, okay? And your job is to answer on that form, okay? So make sure you're on the supply headlines form. It'll be linked in there on day 14 stuff, all right? What is going to happen? So just to start us off here, okay, is we have a record peach harvest, and the price of peaches is the lowest in a decade. Well, if you look close, we're talking about frozen peach pies. What's that going to do for our supply of frozen peach pies? Okay, think about it for a second. Try to match it with a shifter and see if you can't take a good guess. All right, so hopefully you have your shifters in front of you, right? And you're looking through here, okay? And hopefully you can wrap your head around that peaches go into peach pies. That's pretty obvious, all right? And peaches are cheaper. So we have a change in the price of inputs, okay? Change in the price of inputs, you should say that's going to increase our supply, all right? And it should give you the correct answer. All right, so I want you to do those. That's your assignment for today. The next day, day 15, things get a little bit more challenging. We're going to combine supply and demand, okay, and talk about what is referred to as equilibrium. And so things get a little bit more intense, and so it's important that you're taking your time and going through some of these things. Once it clicks, I think getting to the point where it clicks can be a little bit frustrating, but once we get to the point that it clicks, I think you'll be a lot more confident. Okay, so we'll move forward then. Make sure you get this stuff going. We'll talk about, like I said, equilibrium on day 15. We'll have a little bit more practice and correction and give you an assignment on that day as well, basically a practice assignment. I'm sorry, a practice assignment and then an assignment that hopefully you can figure out a way to work on it with a partner and go from there. One last thing is I meant to allow you to be able to take this multiple times. Again, you're not getting graded on the points that you score, whether you get 1 out of 8 or 8 out of 8. You're not getting graded. You're going to get some points for some participation. And I think I set it up where you are able to take the quiz more than once. And so, if you go through and guess on the ones that you missed, awesome. If that doesn't allow you to do that, somebody let me know, and I'll try to tinker with it so we're able to do that. Okay. Keep up the good work. Those of you that are keeping on top of things. If you've been a little bit behind, now's the time to pick it back up. Okay. And we'll keep moving forward through this. All of a sudden we're 14 days in. I think there's only 39 total days, so the end is going to reach us here pretty quick. Okay. Don't be afraid to reach out. Once again, I hope things are going well for you. I'm hoping you're staying positive. I'm trying my best to stay positive. I know it's a challenge sometimes, but hang in there. Better days are ahead, and we'll talk soon.